I'm Route 66 and today I'm going to talk to you about the Arturia Polybrute. The Polybrute is a 6-voice analog synthesizer, and you can sort of call it a 6-voice version of the Matrix Brute that I also have. I don't know if you can see it down here, but while it is for a big part the same, it isn't really, because it's missing a few parts and it has a few extra things. One of the things it's missing is the 12 CV in and outputs on the back panel here that the Matrix Brute has. The Polybrute has none of those. It has I think it has a clock in out, but that's it. If you want to do any CV gate clocking stuff or interface it with your Eurorec stuff, no, it won't do that. So for that you will need the Matrix Brute if you still want the Arturia sound. The other thing with the Polybrute is that the Matrix is smaller. This is 16 by 16, this is 8 by 12. That's still a very good size, but there's more possibilities on the Matrix Brute's matrix than here. The Matrix Brute has 3 oscillators and 2 LFOs, and the third oscillator can be also an LFO, kind of like the Minimoog does. The Polybrute has 2 oscillators and 3 LFOs. There is no mixing of LFO and oscillator. So the Matrix Brute is a bit more flexible in this case, although, yeah, okay, it is what it is. The other thing is that the effects on the Polybrute are digital. The effects on the Matrix Brute are analog, and I have to say I personally like those analog effects. They have more character. The ones here are more usable, and there's more of them. There's reverbs, delays, pitch shifters, lo-fi, sampling, blah. They're much more usable than those. Those on the Matrix Brute actually sort of are part of the sound of the synthesizer itself, and these, because they are analog and these are digital effect, this is much more like having just a standard digital multi-effect box built in to the synthesizer, which is pretty much what it is. But you know, if you want to color your sound a little bit, it's handy to have this on there. There is much more in here than what it says here on the front panel. It's only here reverb, delay and modulation effects, but especially the modulation effects. There's only chorus, phaser, and there's an alt possibility here, and alt has a list this long of other effects that you can use on it. So there's quite a lot of effects in there actually, and of course the Polybrute does more. It is 6-voice polyphonic. It has a morph function. It has a randomizer. I'm a big fan of randomizers. I will show you that later on. And it has that morphy touch surface thing. It also has a touch strip here that the Matrix Brute doesn't have. So I was in the beginning sort of thinking of getting rid of my Matrix Brute and getting this, but I'm not sure I want to do that, because I use the Matrix Brute a lot to interface with other CV gate stuff, and I will lose that possibility, and that's kind of a shame. So maybe I'll just have to have them both. That's a little word about the basic sound of the machine. People always say those Arturia synths are kind of hard and harsh and distorted and blah blah blah. They can be, but they don't have to be. There's always the trick that I always tell everybody is turn down all the pot meters on your whatever has a volume. Never set it all the way open, because for some reason there is built in I don't even know if it's distortion, overdrive, whatever, but If you have all the volumes at 100%, it will start sounding hard. If you don't do that, set it to 3/4 in the mixer. Never set it more than 3/4 here, or sometimes even half is even better. Those volume pot meters on those Arturia synths, they matter. On normal synths, I always turn everything up to 11 as well, but on this thing, if you want it to sound subtle, don't do that. Having said that, this thing sounds more round to me than the Matrix Brute, or I've tested the mini brutes and the micro brutes and the whatever brutes there are. I've had pretty much most of them here in the studio, and they all sort of had that same kind of basic sound that I just explained. Doesn't have to be how it is, but this thing by itself sounds a bit more rounder, a bit warmer, a bit more analog. I don't know if you can say that, but and it has some unique possibilities to make it sound even older than these other ones do, and I'll tell you something about that in a little bit too. All right, so let's look at the oscillators of the Polybrute. Right now it's in poly mode. There's poly mode where every voice is, a note on the keyboard. There is unison mode where it plays all of them under one key, and there is mono mode where it plays one voice. We're going to start with a simple saw wave. And to compare that, I have a Roland SH09 here that I can compare it to with the same saw wave. This is the SH09 and this is the Polybrute. That sort of sounds similar. Then we go to, this is the triangle wave, which is in itself not very interesting, but the triangle wave has a metallizer to it, which is a wave folder. Which, of course, also can be modulated. As soon as we use the second knob, which is for the pulse wave, you can mix and match, but as soon as this one is all the way to the right, then the saw and triangle wave parameter doesn't do anything anymore. So it's nice because, for instance, on the 09 you just have the switch between the three waveforms, and here you have infinite possibilities in between. So here is the pulse wave, here is the pulse width, and of course we can modulate the pulse width with an LFO. Sounds kind of like here, let's see. Yeah, not too bad, not too bad, not too bad. Only of course here we have two VCOs, and the 09 has only one VCO. But the sound is, yeah, I've heard better pulse waves, I will admit that, but this is pretty good. And of course you have two of them, because this is only oscillator 1. We also have oscillator 2. Oscillator 2 has the same. This is only oscillator 2. Same possibilities, only instead of the metallizer, this has a sub oscillator, which gives it a nice bottom part under everything. And the tuning is less elaborate than up here. This is always nice. It has these little lights when it's in tune. I always like that. Same thing. It has the same waveforms, the same pulse width. Here is the Let's this one again. Sync. Oscillator sync. And here is FM. So it does that too. I'm just showing you a simple version because of course this can all be modulated and blah 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 blah. You can do all kinds of crazy stuff with that. On the mixer you can route both VCOs through any combination of the two filters, or both, or one or two, or one to the one to the other, and there's all kinds of stuff available there as well. There's a noise generator, and it's same goes for the noise generator. It can go through any of those filters and routings. So onto the filters. All right, the filters. Two filters, just like with the Matrix Brute. On top we have the Steiner filter, and here on the bottom we have the ladder filter. The ladder filter is a standard analog filter. You find it in all kinds of other analog synths. The Steiner filter comes originally from the Steiner-Parker synthesizer, but Arturia have adopted it in many other synths, including all those the little brutes, as I always call them, and it's also here in the Matrix Brute as well. There's pretty violent character. It's not as crazy as the Polyfox. I have a Polyfox. The Polyfox filter. That's a completely different kettle of fish, but it is pretty hardcore. Let's see if we can get any sound out of this thing. Here's VCO1 that's being taken through the Steiner filter. Resonance. It's a multi-mode filter, so here we have low pass mode, we have high pass mode, and here we have band pass mode. It's not listed in the manual, but if you go back to about 11 o'clock here, it turns into a notch filter. That's also there. The VCF amount is also, of course, you can set that. And there is the the brute factor, which is essentially just a feedback loop, like the old trick from the Minimoog, where you take the output of the filter and you plug it back into itself and it will feedback. And that's basically what that brute factor is. That's VCO2. Here is VCO1. And that is now going through the ladder filter. This is all pretty standard stuff. There is distortion. It's not really crazy, luckily, but yeah. You can set both filters in series or in parallel. That's also nice. One of the fun things that I like to do with those filters is, it's a very simple trick, but you can do it on Matrix Brute as well, is you modulate both the filters, and you set one filter, you give it negative modulation, and the other filter you give it positive modulation. So let's see, where are those filters, number 3 and 4. So you give this a little positive. Or you can do it even better. I'm doing it now with two different LFOs. The trick with those LFOs is you can sync them. So they can sync to an incoming MIDI clock, and you can make whole sequences like this. Can make some pretty crazy things this way, but yeah, that's the fun part. You can make all those things move, and it's one of the main things that I always like to do on my Matrix Brute is all those crazy modulation possibilities are cool, but if you sort of want to emulate classic analog sounds, the best thing to do is use a lot of that modulation, but use it only a little bit, only give it a tiny little bit, and then you get sounds that are all a little organic, and it's a little, no key press should be 100% the same. That's basically the trick of a lot of this stuff. Alright, let's talk a bit about those LFOs. There are 3 of them. 2 of them are pretty similar, only this one has a phase button and this one has a fade in button, but for the rest these are all the same 7 waveforms. You can switch between mono, poly and re-trigger, which is how they re-trigger when you press more than one key. Do they fall in sync with the others, or do they each do their own thing? And the third LFO is a little bit simpler, does not have all these waveforms. It just has a curve, a symmetry and a rate switch with some other switches down here, but it's still it can still do more than most other LFOs on my other synths, but it's a bit simpler than those 2. Let's see. Let's go through the see, these last 2 are almost more of a sample and hold type of waveform, more like noise. What you of course miss is the possibility that the Matrix Brute has to draw your own waveforms on the Matrix, but that is sort of the same principle. Is you basically use your LFO as a sequencer, and that's one of the cool things that you can do with the Matrix Brute. Of course, other synths can do that too, but the fun thing about this is that these LFOs can sync to MIDI clock. So for example, if I turn on the 909, the 909 sends MIDI clock to the Polybrute. So just a very simple beat, and then it follows the pattern. And this is just LFO, there's no arpeggiator or sequencer or anything going on. Super cool. I think it's really neat that it enough of you that that it does these tricks. Those are the little fun extras from the Polybrute. The Matrix. I still think the Matrix is one of the coolest things that's been invented for synths in the last, I don't know, 30 years. I don't know if you've ever had other synths with modulation matrices, but they're usually super far hidden inside the synthesizer. Good example for this is my Waldorf, my Microwave XT. What it can do is even far better than what the Polybrute or even the Matrix Brute can do. It has like mathematical functions in its matrix or in its modulation matrix and everything. The only problem is you have to edit it on a little display that's like this high, and it just, at least for me, it just doesn't work. I hate that. And so what I love about this is that it brings the matrix out into the open. You can see what you're doing. You can see what your connections are. Here is the list of stuff that where it goes to. Here are your sources, your destinations. You have 8 pages of them. The Matrix Brute, it used to be regular, 12 regular and 4 programmable, and then they changed that because people wanted more programmable ones, and now basically everything is programmable. Here on the Polybrute, everything is programmable from the start, so you have 8 pages of 8, you have 64 programmable destinations, and your destinations can be anything. It can be any knob, any button, any slider, any whatever crazy thing that you can think of. It will do that. What I haven't been able to do on this one yet is what I can do here, which is circular modulation, where basically one part modulates another part, which then modulates the same part. So you sort of create modulation feedback loops, and that's because the Matrix Brute has 4 macro knobs. I have not found that here yet. It doesn't have macro knobs. Maybe there's a possibility, maybe there isn't, but who cares, because this can do so much other cool stuff. And one of the tricks that I'm going to show you now is the modulation of the voices. This thing is 6 voices, and you can set how these voices are played. Normally it will play 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 if you play 6 keys, and then it will always play voice 1 as your first note, voice 2 as your second note, etc. But what you can set up here is that it will play circular. So circular in this case means that no matter what your note is, it always goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if you play it 6 times, normally it would always be voice 1 if you play one note 6 times. And with this, it will do it in order of 6. So if you play, these are now all 6 voices that you hear. Of course, you don't hear the difference because they're all sounding the same. But there is a modulation source here called voices, and that, if you attach that to anything, you can make basically every key press, even though it's the same note, sound different. And how does that sound? What it reminds me of is my Monopoly. The Korg Monopoly does that, and it has 4 voices. If you set it in poly mode and with its arpeggiator on, it will do this. That's the same key that you press every time. It's even more fun with the effects on. I have used this in so many bass lines, it's not even funny. And until now, that was the only synth that could do that, or that I know of anyway. Maybe apart from Eurorec things, I don't know. But this does it too, and this does it more controlled and with 6 steps. So hey, this is my new friend. What you do is you set this up. The voiceless modulation goes to the pitch of VCO1 and the pitch of VCO2. I have it now set up on VCO1, and let's give it a little, you can hear it go. If you do this subtle, you just get a nice D tune, where, you know, every key is not really the same every time, like we were talking about earlier. The trick, however, with this thing that you can do is keep going like that. Turn oscillator 2 off for now. See? And all of a sudden you have the same effect as. Now I'm only doing this to the pitch of the VCOs, but of course you can use that modulation on 62 other parts of the synthesizer that whatever you want. So every key press can sound completely different. Combine that with an arpeggiator and or even with the sequencer or whatever, and you are in business. It's so cool that it does that. Two other things that I will look at now. One is the Morphing. Let's turn this down a little bit because this is a bit crazy. The Morphing has 3 axes, an x-axis and y-axis and a z-axis. You can push it in and it'll do whatever you program it to do. But it also, you can go up and down. And you can also go left to right. So you can sort of draw stuff on it with your finger. It's a bit like those chaos pads from back in the days. I could sort of do the same thing, only that would light up. That was a little bit too rave 1995. This is a bit more subtle. This is a nice wooden thing. There is another pitch strip here. This is a touch strip. I would like to demonstrate it, but there's nothing is attached to it right now. It's got 2 wheels here. And then, of course, we have the morph function, which is also pretty damn cool. Let me go back to another kind of preset here. I don't know. Let's listen to something if that does anything. Oh yes, it does. It goes from basically from you can load 2 different kinds of presets on those sides. It will morph between those 2, and of course you can have that. You can modulate that as well. Let's see. Let's quickly let's change this. All you have to do is push button 1 and then turn the knob, and then the modulation, the morph is the modulation destination. Let's give that an LFO. And there it goes. That's basically the same as me now turning this 50,000 times per... This is so cool. This is so cool. Yeah, so that morph function is, you can do all kinds of crazy things with it. One of the fun things is that you can load presets and with that morph function find sounds that are in between. There's, it is an actual real morph function. It's not a crossfade or anything. It actually morphs the parameters. You can see if you turn that button, I don't know if it's, yeah, you can actually see it. I don't know if you can see it here on the video, but if you turn it, at one point all these the patches will some of the lights will come on, and that's because some of the settings are actually changing. The other fun thing about the morph function is to combine it with the randomizer. And this thing has a really cool randomize function. The randomizer sort of works with whatever sound you have selected on this thing. I'm not sure if it's supposed to do that, but it's what I found is if you set it on different sounds and then press the randomize function, it will incorporate parts of that sound. What you do, here we have, for instance, we have this sound here, and then you go into the settings menu and then you press number 4, the preset info, and then number 3, generate. And now it's generated a random sound. That in this case is actually a pretty usable sound as well. The fun thing is now you can do with a morph function. You can find sounds there as well, so that you morph, you randomize a sound, and then with the morph function you can find the in-between sounds. And believe me, this is the best way to fill up a bank of these sounds in absolutely no time, because it does generate sometimes sounds that are not really usable, but you know, a little tweaking of the pitch usually will set that. It's not. I have some other synths that will generate like total random garbage, and that's not what this does. This does generate musically usable sounds. Only they are mostly usable. Yeah, if you use kind of more experimental type of music. If you're only looking for like trance leads and that kind of stuff, then that's not really the best function to use. But anyway, I think it's great how it does that. All right, let's talk a little bit about the arpeggiator and the sequencer. These are more or less the same as they are in the Matrix Brute. So if you really want to know all the ins and outs, there are shitloads of videos on YouTube that explain this stuff. So I'm just going to show you a few possibilities here, what it will do in the Polybrute. Here we have a typical standard kind of sound. The arpeggiator, this is a part of the arpeggiator that I find the most interesting, is you can make it go up and down and blah blah, all that stuff. It will also generate patterns. There is a pattern generator here. You can set it to, if you hit the play mode, it will go, let's see, it will go up, down, inclusive, exclusive, which includes or excludes the last notes you played. If you've played more, order, random, and then here is pattern. And what it does with pattern is it's a pattern generator. So it's kind of like a sequencer, but it's patterns that are based on some mathematical blah 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 blah. Don't ask me for all the details, but all I know is that it works. It sounds really cool. They're all. It's not like you're all of a sudden going to get the killer bass line that you've been looking for your whole career. It's not going to come out of that thing, but it will provide things that are just a little different than what the standard arpeggiator will do. And the cool thing is that if you find a cool one, then if you go here to the sequencer mode, there is function here that is called copy to sequence, and you can copy that pattern then into the sequencer, and then you can save it as a sequence. So it's also not, you found something nice and you have to use it now, because if you turn the machine off, it's gone forever. This one, you can actually save stuff, so that's cool. The arpeggiator, for the rest, the arpeggiator behaves as an arpeggiator. When you play it, it plays, and when it stops, it stops. There's a hold function. There's a swing. There's a gate function. Now you know how an arpeggiator works. The sequencer is the same sequencer as in the Matrix Brute. The one thing I never liked about that sequencer in the Matrix Brute is that it would play whenever it got MIDI clock. I don't want that. I want that thing to play as like the sequencer or like the arpeggiator. When I press the button, I want it to play stuff, and when I stop playing, then I want it to stop. There is a trick. There is a trick for that. I will show you that later in another video. I will do another video about the Matrix Brute, or about the thing that I'm using for that. I haven't tried that yet, if that same thing works with here. I'm not sure it will, but otherwise it can probably be adapted for it. Anyway, what I like the best thing about this whole sequencer setup here, apart from, you can see everything here on that matrix, and is the matrix arpeggiator. Then you press the sequence and arpeggiator buttons at the same time, and then you get the matrix arpeggiator, the matrix arpeggiator sequencer, blah blah blah. It's sort of a combination of arpeggiator and sequencer. It's kind of like that pattern sequencer that I just said, but you can program things yourself here. You can make patterns, and one of the cool things that you can do with this thing, because this is a polyphonic synthesizer. I haven't shown you much of the polyphonic workings of it, and I haven't played many chords, and there's a very simple reason for that, is I can't play a synth. I can't play a keyboard. I'm not a chord guy at all. I don't even use chords in my own tracks. If I do, they are accidents or random. But I see chords and I see polyphonic synths as ways to, you have basic sound, and then with the extra notes you can add little harmonies and little things. That's more how I think of it, like extra little melodies and little accents that you can put here and there. Well, that's what this thing will do. This thing will play with this matrix arpeggiator. It can play, for instance, it can play chords. Like now, you hear that same arpeggio again that I've played earlier, and that's because here are the steps that it plays, and here are how many notes per step it will play. So what you do is, if you change every step here to 2, it will play 2 notes per step rather than 1, and so that means that in those first notes it will now play polyphonic. If you add those same notes here as well, the whole thing plays 2 notes. So that's cool. You can set it for 3, you can even set it for 6 notes. It'll play 6 note chords as an arpeggio. I know older synths used to have that chord memory switch, and then you could arpeggio with that. I think my DW8000 has that. I'm not even sure. I think it does. I'm not sure, but there's other machines here. The Monopoly does it. That has a chord memory, and then you can arpeggiate the chords. Anyway, it's a well-known trick for stupid old ravers like me that don't know how chords work. And yeah, it's a certain sound, and it's great that this thing can do that as well. So, are there things that I do not like about this Polybrute? Well, I've been reviewing synths for more than 20 years for a magazine here in Holland, and you always find something that you don't like. I have to admit I had to look hard with this one, because no, it's pretty likable. The one thing I do not like about this, and I don't know why in the hell they've done that, is these knobs are all super smooth, hard plastic. Unlike the Matrix Brute knobs, which are more soft plastic, and what happens is your hands slide over these knobs. I really do not like the knobs on this thing. I mean, it's not a deal breaker, but it's one of those things where I think, really, could you not have done anything else? I understand you want to use harder plastic knobs for whatever reason, because those things, they get dirty and everything after a while, but there must have been other choices than this. I mean, come on. But for the rest, yeah, you can cry about the fact that it only has 6 voices. It's not really that much, you can get by, but 8, 12 would have been nicer, but then it would have been more expensive and bigger, and they would have had to put a fan in the back and all that stuff, because all this shit does generate heat. You can feel, it's not like the Monopoly really gets hot. You can fry an egg on top of that thing after a while, but this does get warm. And so I understand that 6 is kind of, I guess, the sweet spot from a price and possibilities point of view, because something like the Monopoly has 4 in its poly. And that's just not enough. I can understand. For me, it would be, but I can understand. If you want a polysynth, you don't want, you know, a mono synth with 2 extra keys. That's a little pointless. So, but nah, 6 for me, it's okay. But I understand people that say they would prefer 8 or 12 or something. The only other thing I can think of is that you use the matrix also to select the presets, and I found on the Matrix Brute that it's slower. I would prefer if you just had 2 buttons where you can just scroll really quickly through presets rather than having to push each one. The nice thing is with this, you can go from this one to this one in one go rather than having to. And you know, this is 8 pages of 60, so there is a point where it doesn't work anymore. If you have several thousand presets, you need another system. It also does snapshots. You can take snapshots of presets in between while you're editing things. And while that's a very handy system, I've gone a few times where I thought I saved the sound and it turned out I didn't. I only made a snapshot and I turned the synth back on and sound gone. So be prepared for things like that. It is kind of a problem with synths like this, at least for me, is they can do so many things. You tend to get lost in some of the possibilities, and sometimes things are not quite what you think. And if you are like me, then you think, manual, who needs manual? And so we'll just, you know, I'll just sort it out as we go along, and usually you can, but you are bound to fuck up in some way or another with this, and you know, this synth is no exception. But that matrix, I'm not very sure about using it for the presets, but I guess it is, out of all the possibilities, it is the best way on this thing, because that matrix is there. So why not use it? The other thing that this thing comes with that's kind of nice, I don't use it myself, but there is an editor for it, or bank manager. That's actually a virtual version of the synth, and you can use that also as a VST plugin in your DAW. So that's kind of cool. If you're working totally in the box, you can use this thing basically as a soft synth. And I try to stay as far from soft synths as I can, but you know, I understand that people do that and use that and do everything in the box, and then it can be a pain in the ass to have to go to the hardware synth. Well, you can put the hardware synth on the other side of the room somewhere, pretend it's software, and you know, you still have the sound that you have to somehow get into your audio system. But yeah, you can control the whole thing completely from a plugin, which is kind of cool, because that means you can also make snapshots in the plugin. And while I say that, I realized it can do snapshots itself, and maybe that's why it's doing that. But hey, sometimes this is one of those synths where you realize things after a while and you go, okay, that's why they did that. Conclusion. What do I think of this synth? Well, you may have guessed from my rather enthusiastic review that I do like it. I love it. I think it is for a poly. If I compare this to my analog polys that I have here, the 8000, I have to look around. What else? I have a Krumar Bit 1 module. I have a few others. I've had shitloads of others before, Junos and whatever. This is next level poly. This is really next level poly. If you compare it to other stuff that's on the market right now, it can do things that, you know, since from Novation and whoever else, the Dave Smith polys, the Prophets, they can't do all that stuff. They can do a lot. I'm a big fan of those Prophets and everything, but this is next level in its possibilities, and especially that more function. And no other synth can do that in the analog domain. In the digital domain, it's a different story. I have a Lexicon Vortex delay from the 90s that could already morph between patches, but that's digital. Analog morphing is different. So is it almost infinite in its possibilities? Yes, it is. This is one of those synthesizers where you can ask, can it do this? And the answer, almost every time, the answer is yes, rather than no or no, but it will only do it this way. Or you can only do this, but then you have to sacrifice that. This doesn't do that. It's so crazy. It's like a sound designer's dream. And the Matrix Brute was already like that. But the problem of the Matrix Brute, of course, was that it's a monosynth. It's monophonic. Or it's actually kind of more like duophonic because you can do separate things. But it's not a polysynth. This is a polysynth. This plays chords. You can have chords and a little bass line, and it makes the weirdest sound. It does the craziest stuff. And I've always I still want the Prophet 10 is high. The Prophet X is high on the X10. I don't know. Is high on my want list. Purely because it's unlimited that stuff. What you can do with those synths is amazing. But this is sort of the analog equivalent of that. I've never had an analog synth that does all the stuff that this does. And I think the basic sound is good. The possibilities are endless. There's really no sound-wise, controller-wise. There is really nothing. Arturia has made some the mishaps in the past when it came to like bugs in the operating system and all that stuff. I've had the Matrix Brute. I was one of the first ones that had one. I never had a lot of the problems, funny enough, that other people reported, but there have been problems, and they're not the only ones. I've had other synths that crashed and all kinds of drama. This doesn't have that. It's stable. It works. It syncs well. It works with the computer. It edits. It does what it needs to do. And for me, hey, that's what a synth is. And all I can hope is that I may have to sell some of these to buy one, because unfortunately, it's on loan from Arturia, and they are not at the moment of not writing. I'm not writing. What am I? The moment of talking about this, they are not available yet, probably because of all that Corona stuff. It should have been here already, but it isn't. And I think from next month, from January or February, they should be available. And I do want one. I do want one. It is a really, really nice machine. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to play a few of the patches and a few of the things that I've made, or the presets that are in here. I was not too pleased with the presets. The presets are cool. They show what the synth can do, but only a small portion of what it can do, especially if you're into sound design and things like that. It can do so much more than what those presets show you. So it's also really a synth to dive in yourself, and just you can lose yourself for hours with this thing. So I'm going to play you some sounds. Here they are. Nice and powerful bass sound. So the strings. A nice arp. So it's kind of a nice little old arp sound. Let's see how that sounds with that. Give it a beat. It's super simple, but it's really nice that it does some of these sounds. This is also a nice sort of arp. Oh, this is the this is the you can split keyboard, and so this half has the arp, and then this half plays over it. It's a bi-timbral synth. You can split keyboard and have sound here and a sound here. This is kind of a fun one. This is for all all that trance heads can have fun with this. This is not really my thing. Let's see what else we have here. Bass, more bass, flat Eric bass sound, or be careful. Yeah, you recognize that, right? Yeah, you must recognize that. You have to be careful that it doesn't. The wobble responds to the velocity that you give it. Let's go into some of these. One of the other things I don't like about it that I see now, that is, if you go from one bank to another bank, the sound is still there, but your matrix is gone. So it's you go to bank 8 and now you're like, where was I? And you go back to bank 1, then it's there. But it would be nice if that would stay on, or I don't know. I don't even know if that's really a problem or not. Maybe I'm just creating a problem out of something that isn't there. But that's a standard sound again. Default sound. I do like this. I've made tracks with that sound. This is some of the stuff that I did myself. There's a sequence in there somewhere. I think these are patches I made with the randomizer. It has serious power in the low end. That's one of the things that surprised me. You can really if you have subwoofers or something, you can just shake those things. It's crazy what it does with sub bass. It's almost like a demented church organ here. There's the sequence. Okay, the tempo is a little lower. It's good soundtrack stuff, this. Standard sort of analog strings. Bit faster. Turn that snare off a little bit. You get the idea. You get the idea. See, the cool thing about some of these sounds is that there is There is an arpeggiator, there is a sequence, but it's not immediately obvious. It sort of starts as a sound and then the sequence comes sliding in, and that's nice. And this is another one that I recognize the name of the preset, but I think this is another randomizer I made on the basis of the preset. Bank is over. I think this was around the time when I was starting to lose presets from the what I was talking about earlier, the saving problem. See, this is another one of those sounds where it just does an ARP, and if you turn it into a matrix preset, okay, I see it now. It only plays one step. I turn this to 2 steps. I have to change the link. But see, now it plays chord. And now it doesn't. That's so cool, that thing. Anyway, this was my take on the Arturia Polybrute. I'm going to do a lot more stuff on this channel. This is only the first video. So what I have learned from all these other video channels is I have to tell everybody to subscribe and blah blah blah, all that stuff, but you know all that. But do it anyway, because there's lots of cool stuff coming up. I'm going to talk about all these machines in here, and I'm sure there's more new ones going to be coming in pretty soon. So I hope to see you again for the next video. For now, goodbye.